This Geography Burst video focuses on the question: evaluate how to measure development. You should use pages 194 to 196 of your textbook to support this video. Topics covered will include the Brundtland, the Human Development Index and the Demographic Transition Model. First, part of your answer will involve describing. You should always say what you see. What are the key facts which you know? Make sure that you've outlined them clearly. If we look at the Brundtland first, we know that this is an economic measure. It's a visual depiction of the North-South divide, an imaginary line on the map proposed by Mr. Brandt in the 1980s, dividing rich economies from poor economies. It's mostly based on gross national income, the total value of goods and services produced by a country divided by the population. Next, we describe the Demographic Transition Model. There are 5 stages to the Demographic Transition Model. It describes a sequence of changes over a period of time in the relationship between population change and birth and death rates. The model is based on population changes in several industrialised countries in Western Europe and North America. The model suggests that all countries will pass through similar demographic transition stages of population cycles. As you can see from this picture, it measures births and death rates per 1,000 and total population change over 5 stages. The later stages of the line are dotted because they're a future prediction about how population will develop in the future. The Human Development Index. This is a social measure. It aims to measure how people's lives benefit from the wealth of a country. It includes life expectancy at birth, literacy rates, gross national income per head, and it's expressed in a value between 0 and 1. The UK is 14th with a score of 0.930. The lowest 10 countries are all in Africa. Now, the next part of your answer will involve explaining. You need to say what you see, plus why that is the way it is. You should outline the reasons behind events or facts. So, why do some development measures work more effectively than others? 1. Changing data. Since development began, there have been changes in the way that countries operate, in their wealth and those sorts of factors. For example, the recent oil wealth of some Middle Eastern countries, or the industrial rebirth of the newly emerging economies, for example, Brazil, Nigeria, China. Averages. For example, in an oil-rich country, it is possible to have a high concentration of wealth with a small number of people. But overall, the average standard of living in the country may be quite low. Unreliable data. Government corruption may affect data which is available. Under-reporting may also warp figures. For example, a country may not wish to accurately report infant mortality, either because they are unable to measure it accurately or because the result reflects negatively on them. Finally, in many countries there are what's called informal economies, where people would swap goods or exist on a subsistence economy where they grew or produced for their own use, and so they don't have necessarily factors which would register as formal wealth. Now, the final part of any 9-mark question, after you've thought about what you know and you've thought about why it is what it is, you should begin to evaluate, to give an intelligent opinion. It may help to look at what the patterns are behind the facts, to group ideas together and to weigh them up carefully. Let's have a look at the full answer. Our question, worth 9 marks, evaluate which is the most reliable method of measuring development. First, you should describe. Development can be measured by the Brundtland, the HDI and the DTM. Then, an explanation. The Brundtland shows an imaginary division between the rich north and the poor south. The HDI uses a large number of social economic factors such as literacy rate and GDP to consider how developed a country is. This makes it quite accurate and comparable to all countries. The demographic transition model is fairly good at showing the continuous development in stages on a graph. You can use this to predict what will develop next in that country, for example, birth rates, death rates, etc. However, the Brandt line is not as effective as it's outdated and it doesn't take into consideration changes since the model was developed, for example, the newly industrialised countries or the newly economically developed countries. The HDI is also inaccurate if you use only one factor, for example birth rate, as it doesn't take into account the policies of that country, for example the UK promoting births. The DTM is not statistically accurate and it lacks a definite time frame. There's no way, for example, to say what will happen in the next 5 years or the next 10 years using this model. It works best as a general guideline. To conclude, all of the measurements have positives and negatives, but the HDI is considered the most reliable measure of development because it uses several factors to analyse a country's development and is more easily comparable between different countries. Geography. Know your world.